Around 1200 BCE, the great civilizations of the Bronze Age Mediterranean began to fall, one after another, in the span of a single lifetime. Cities were burned, empires vanished, and ancient texts blamed one mysterious force: the Sea Peoples. For centuries, historians have called it one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the ancient world. Who were the Sea Peoples? Where did they come from? And why, in just a few short years, did they bring the mightiest empires of the Bronze Age to their knees? The only clues come from the walls of Egypt, carved by the one civilization that claimed to have survived them. At Medinet Habu, Pharaoh Ramesses III left behind an inscription describing an invasion unlike anything Egypt had faced before. The inscription speaks of a confederation of sea-born warriors: the Peliset, the Cheker, the Shekelesh, the Denyen, and the Weshesh, descending from the islands, striking by land and sea in a single coordinated assault. But this was only the final chapter. To understand how the Sea Peoples brought the Bronze Age world to collapse, we have to go back to the age of golden empires, when Egypt, the Hittites, and Mycenae ruled a world that seemed unshakable. By 1250 BCE, the Eastern Mediterranean was bound together by an extraordinary web of trade and diplomacy. Egyptian gold flowed north. Cypriot copper and Anatolian tin met in the forges of Ugarit, fused into bronze, the metal that powered every army and every economy of the age. This was a world of great powers who called each other brother. Pharaoh Ramesses II of Egypt, the Hittite king Hattusa III, ruling from his mountain capital of Hattusa. Together, they had ended decades of war with the world's first known peace treaty. Further west, across the Aegean Sea, the Mycenaean Greeks built fortress palaces of massive stone, ruled by warrior kings buried with gold masks and bronze swords. Their world would later inspire the legends of Homer, but in this age, it was very real and very powerful. But beneath this golden age, cracks were forming. Ancient letters, clay tablets dug up centuries later, reveal kings writing to each other in growing panic, grain shortages, unpaid soldiers, and strange ships appearing on the horizon, attacking coastal towns without warning. No one yet knew what these raiders wanted, or where they truly came from. Some called them wanderers from broken lands. Others believed they were refugees fleeing a disaster no one could name. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain: they were only the beginning. The first tremors came not from war, but from the sky itself. Tree rings and lake sediments studied by modern scientists reveal a brutal truth. The Eastern Mediterranean was gripped by a prolonged drought, one of the worst in 3,000 years. As harvests failed year after year, the great empires that once seemed eternal began to strain. Egyptian records speak of grain ships sent as emergency aid to the starving Hittites. A desperate act from a rival turned reluctant lifeline, but grain ships could not stop what was coming. Earthquakes, later called the earthquake storms by archaeologists, began shaking the region in violent clusters, toppling palaces that had stood for centuries in mere moments. City after city fell in the chaos. Ugarit, the great trading hub, was struck and never fully recovered. Its people wrote letters begging for help that would never arrive in time. Some of those tablets were still baking in the kiln, unsent, when the city burned. Drought, famine, earthquakes. The great empires were already wounded, their armies stretched thin, their granaries empty. It was in this moment of weakness that the ships began to gather. The age of golden peace was ending. The age of the Sea Peoples was about to begin. The first confirmed strike came against the Hittite Empire itself. Hattusa, the mighty mountain capital that had stood for 5 centuries, was abandoned and burned. Archaeologists still debate exactly who struck the final blow, But the empire that once rivaled Egypt simply ceased to exist. With the Hittites gone, a vacuum opened across Anatolia and the Levant. Survivors fled south and west, joining the growing tide of displaced peoples. Some historians believe it was among these refugees that the coalition later known as the Sea Peoples first took shape. Meanwhile, on the island of Cyprus, archaeologists uncovered something chilling: sudden layers of destruction at multiple sites, dated to the exact same narrow window of time. This was not random raiding. This was something coordinated, and it was moving fast. Word of the destruction reached Egypt through frantic messages. The Hittite king, in one of the last letters he ever sent, wrote to the ruler of Ugarit, "The enemy ships are already here. Whatever is left, send it, and let me know what happens to you." That letter was found still baked in its kiln. The reply never sent. Ugarit fell before help could come. And now, with the great trade routes severed and the Hittites gone, the surviving powers turned their eyes toward the last great fortress standing: Egypt. In the Egyptian capital, word of the fallen kingdoms spread panic through the court. Pharaoh Ramesses III, still young in his reign, understood what was coming. If Hattusa and Ugarit could fall, so could Egypt. He gave the order: prepare for war on every front. Egyptian scouts were sent along the coast and into the Levant, returning with reports that confounded the court. The invaders were not one army, but many different peoples, different ships, different weapons, moving together as one unstoppable tide, bringing their entire families with them in ox carts. This was not merely an army. It was an entire displaced world on the move. A migration born from famine and collapse, now armed and desperate, with nowhere left to go but forward. Egypt would not be facing soldiers alone. It would be facing a people with nothing left to lose. Ramesses III made a decision no pharaoh before him had made in quite this way. Rather than wait behind the walls of the capital, he moved his forces to the borders themselves, determined to meet the invasion before it ever touched Egyptian soil. But even as Egypt's army marched north, unsettling reports arrived from the delta itself. Fishermen spoke of strange sails on the horizon, closer than expected. The invasion Egypt had prepared to meet on foreign soil was, without warning, already arriving at its own shore. Panic spread through the delta villages faster than any army could march. Word reached Ramesses III that the enemy fleet had already been sighted near the mouth of the Nile itself. There was no more time to intercept them on foreign ground. The battle would be fought here, on Egypt's own doorstep. Ramesses ordered something unprecedented. Egyptian archers were stationed not only along the shore, but hidden among the reeds and channels of the delta itself, transforming the very geography of the Nile into a weapon against the invaders' ships. As the sun rose fully over the delta, the invading fleet came into view. Dozens of ships with strange, high-curved prows carrying warriors in horned and feathered helmets, the same figures depicted in the temple carvings that would outlast them all. Then, at Ramesses' signal, the trap was sprung. Egyptian archers rose from the reeds in a single coordinated volley, while war galleys blocked the river mouth, pinning the invaders' ships against the shore. The open sea assault the raiders had counted on became a closing cage. The battle that followed was brutal and decisive. Egyptian forces overturned enemy ships, dragged warriors into the shallows, and shattered the invasion fleet within the confines of the delta itself. Ramesses would later call it the moment he saved Egypt from total destruction. But far from the coast, the wider disaster was only accelerating. Egypt had survived. But survival came at a staggering cost. The royal treasury, already strained by decades of building projects and foreign wars, was drained further by the effort to repel the invasion. The empire that endured was not the empire that began the war. Beyond Egypt's borders, the destruction showed no sign of slowing. Coastal cities across Canaan and the Levant fell one after another. Excavations at sites like Ashkelon reveal thick layers of ash and collapsed buildings, dated to this very same catastrophic decade. In the Aegean, the mighty fortress of Mycenae itself began to weaken. Its palace economy, dependent on long-distance trade for bronze and luxury goods, collapsed as the trade routes that once connected the Mediterranean world were severed one by one. Scientists studying this period now believe no single cause could have toppled so many empires at once. Drought, famine, earthquakes, invasion, and the collapse of trade all compounded together. A perfect storm of catastrophe striking a world that had grown too interconnected and too fragile to survive it. Within a span of fewer than 50 years, nearly every major power of the Bronze Age world had fallen, weakened, or vanished entirely. Only Egypt remained standing, bruised, hollowed out, but standing. Yet even Egypt's victory concealed a deeper mystery that would puzzle historians for thousands of years to come. Who, exactly, had they defeated? For over a century, historians assumed the Sea Peoples were a single invading horde, perhaps a lost tribe or a mysterious nation from beyond the known world. But as archaeologists dug deeper into the evidence, a very different picture began to emerge, one that would upend everything. The names inscribed at Medinet Habu, the Peliset, the Denyen, the Shekelesh, did not describe one people, but several, each with distinct origins. Some bore striking resemblance to names known from Aegean and Anatolian records, long before the invasions ever began. This meant the Sea Peoples were never a single nation at all. They were a coalition. Fragments of collapsed civilizations, displaced sailors, mercenaries, and refugees from Mycenae, Anatolia, and beyond, bound together not by shared blood, but by shared desperation. Even more surprising, some of these same seafaring peoples appear in Egyptian records generations earlier, not as invaders, but as mercenaries fighting alongside Rameses II at the legendary Battle of Kadesh, decades before the collapse ever began. This revelation reframed the entire mystery. The so-called invaders were not distant strangers at all. Many had once served the very empires they would later help destroy. Soldiers and sailors who became refugees, and refugees who, in the end, became conquerors. But if some of the Sea Peoples had once been Egypt's allies, a deeper question emerged. What turned soldiers into refugees, and refugees into destroyers? The answer, researchers now believe, lay not in any single betrayal, but in the collapse of the very system that had employed them. When the palace economies collapsed under drought and earthquake, the great redistribution systems that had paid soldiers, fed sailors, and supplied mercenaries simply stopped functioning. Men who had once fought for kings now had no king left to serve, and no home left to return to. With no wages, no grain, and no kingdom left to protect, these skilled fighters had only one resource remaining: their ships and their weapons. Survival meant turning the very skills once used to defend empires into the means of raiding them. This theory reframed the Sea Peoples not as a foreign menace descending upon a peaceful world, but as a symptom of that world's own unraveling. The human wreckage cast off by the very collapse historians had long blamed them for causing. Yet this raised the final, most unsettling question of all. If the Sea Peoples were not a foreign army, but the broken remnants of the Bronze Age world itself, then the true cause of the collapse was never really them. It was something far larger, and Egypt's own records may have been hiding the deeper truth all along. Modern historians began re-examining the Medinet Habu inscriptions with new scrutiny, and found something striking. Rameses III's account was not a neutral record of events. It was propaganda, carved to glorify a pharaoh whose grip on power was far shakier than the stone walls suggested. Some scholars now argue the Delta battle may not have been the total crushing victory the temple walls claim. Rather than annihilating the Sea Peoples, Egypt may have fought them to a costly standstill. A victory real enough to survive, but far too fragile to celebrate as an ending. This would explain a puzzling detail long noted by historians. Despite claiming a total victory, Rameses III never launched further campaigns to reclaim Egypt's lost territories in Canaan. A truly crushed enemy would have left the door open. Instead, Egypt quietly pulled back. Within decades, Egypt itself began to fracture from within, plagued by tomb robberies, unpaid workers going on strike, and a slow fragmentation of royal authority. The great empire that had claimed to defeat the Sea Peoples was, in truth, already unraveling from the very same pressures that destroyed everyone else. The evidence now converging from Egypt, Anatolia, the Levant, and the Aegean tells a single connected story, not of one mysterious enemy striking a thriving world, but of an entire interconnected civilization collapsing under its own weight, with the Sea Peoples both victims and agents of that fall. With this new understanding, researchers turned to a final piece of the puzzle. Where did the surviving Sea Peoples go after the Delta battle? The answer would be found not in Egypt, but along a stretch of coastline the Egyptians themselves called Canaan. Archaeologists excavating the city of Ashkelon and its neighbors found something remarkable: Aegean-style pottery, unfamiliar cooking techniques, and new architectural styles appearing suddenly in the archaeological layers, almost overnight, replacing centuries of local Canaanite tradition. These newcomers were the Basit, the very people named on the walls of Medinet Habu as invaders. But here, they were not raiders passing through. They were settlers, building permanent cities, farming the land, and slowly blending with the people they now lived among. Over generations, the Basit would give their name to the very land itself. Ancient Canaan, reshaped by their arrival, would eventually become known to history by a name derived from these same Sea People settlers: Philistia. The Sea Peoples had not vanished. They had simply become part of the world they once threatened to destroy. Piece by piece, the evidence had rewritten the story historians thought they knew. The Sea Peoples were never a single invading nation, never a mystery beamed in from beyond the horizon. They were the shattered, wandering remnant of a collapsing world. And in the end, its final, unexpected survivors. Standing today before the ruins of Hattusa, Ugarit, Mycenae, and Ashkelon, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. No empire, however golden, is immune to collapse when drought, disaster, and desperation arrive together. The Bronze Age did not fall to a single enemy at the gates. It fell to itself. And yet, from that collapse, something new was born. The descendants of the Sea Peoples became the Philistines of the Levant. Displaced Mycenaeans carried their stories into a new dark age that would one day give rise to classical Greece. Out of catastrophe, the ancient world quietly remade itself. The mystery of the Sea Peoples endures not because we know too little, but because their story mirrors our own fragile world. One shock compounding another, until even the mightiest civilizations discover how thin the line truly is between order and collapse. 3,000 years later, the ships are gone, the palaces are dust, and the names carved into Egyptian stone are all that remain of a people once feared across the ancient world. But their story survives, a warning and a reminder, carried forward into our own uncertain age. If this journey into one of history's greatest mysteries moved you, subscribe and join us for the next untold story the ancient world left buried in stone. This has been Amazing Basit.